Thank you all very much for joining us here today. I'm Martha Hodgson, a designer by background and now a senior insight and strategy consultant at Cambridge Design Partnership, an end-to-end innovation partner.
And I'm Jessica Platt, an anthropologist and insight and strategy researcher. Martha and I work largely in the front end of innovation across the consumer and healthcare sectors. We focus on uncovering and then translating insight into strategy, design, and development specifications. We are delighted you could join us to learn about the growth of the FemTech sector.
But we actually aren't, we're actually going to begin by telling you that the FemTech sector doesn't actually exist. The FemTech sector doesn't exist? What are we going on about? This whole webinar is about FemTech, right? And Frost & Sullivan are saying that FemTech has a market potential of $50 billion by 2025. So what do we mean the FemTech sector doesn't exist? What we mean is FemTech isn't a traditional sector because it isn't distinct. It doesn't have unique characteristics or a different profile compared to other existing sectors. When we hear examples of FemTech, they are surrounded by so much determination, ambition, and passion to strive to support and improve women's health. But then so do sectors such as women's healthcare, reproductive health, general wellness, and diagnostics. So what is FemTech? FemTech is described in a number of different ways, as a sector, clearly, but also as a market, as a range of innovative new products, and even as a movement. But we'd like to offer you a different perspective today. We would like to introduce you to the idea that FemTech is an innovation philosophy. A philosophy that translates to inclusive, experience-led design, which may or may not be enabled through the application of technology.
Fertility entrepreneur Ida Tin coined the term FemTech in 2016 in a frustrated bid to explain her work to male investors. Despite decades of progress in gender equality, her resulting discussion revealed the breathtaking extent to which product development had largely been operating through a male lens, until recently. We believe that the rise of FemTech has been driven by this seismic shift towards equality, and also by generations of some really great, but also some really badly designed products from a female perspective. Whether you're a man or a woman, working in R&D or marketing, in a global corporation or a startup, viewing FemTech as an innovation philosophy will enable you to take an inclusive, solution-agnostic approach to the jobs that you're trying to solve, and in turn enable you to deliver meaningful innovation that will significantly improve lives. The key principles of the FemTech philosophy are inclusivity, experience-led design, and the smart integration of technology. Today, we are going to share with you how these principles are becoming more front and center today and have led to new product, service, and technology experiences being defined.
Thanks, Jessica. So the first principle in the FemTech philosophy is around inclusivity, which calls for us to focus on people who might have previously been missed or maybe even excluded from the conversation. Whilst you may automatically assume we solely mean women here, this applies to all areas of inclusivity, such as race, sexuality, disability, gender identity, and economics. Now, there are three pillars that support the principle of inclusivity, the first being understand the problem. At CDP, we use a jobs to be done approach, which is a term coined by the late Clayton Christensen. This takes a solution-agnostic perspective on innovation and focuses on understanding the job that someone is trying to get done. Now, understanding their jobs, or jobs to be done, enables you to appreciate that people are multifaceted beings and to capture the multitude of functional, emotional, and social needs that we have every single day. Women have had jobs that are solely, disproportionately, or differently affect them since the beginning of time. For example, when menstruating, there is the functional need to reduce physical stomach discomfort, the emotional need to avoid feeling irritable or having mood swings, and there's a social need to be perceived as someone who is in control of their body. Another example, when trying to conceive, is that there's this basic functional need to know whether I'm actually pregnant. But there's an emotional need also to feel like conception is a natural process. And finally, there's a social need that's around avoiding being perceived as an incomplete woman. A job is a long-term stable unit of analysis for innovation with long-term relevance. Products and services are merely point-in-time solutions that enable people to get a job done. But the jobs that solely, disproportionately, or differently affect women have not always been understood. And therefore, there haven't always been purposeful products or solutions that have been available to women to hire to actually get these jobs done.
For example, women have always had the functional need to prevent unwanted pregnancy. But the way that this has been met has changed over time as technology has developed. From lab intestines to femidoms, the functional need to prevent sperm fertilizing an egg at an inopportune moment has been met with a variety of solutions. And they work fairly well. Condoms are 95% effective. But many of the existing contraceptives don't meet the social and emotional needs of users, particularly women. Needs such as feel in control of my body, avoid ingesting hormones, and feel confident in the moment are not always addressed by condoms or long-acting hormonal birth control, which prevent pregnancy but strip the user of control over their own body. Phexy by EvoFem understands and addresses the range of functional, social, and emotional needs that are inherent in preventing pregnancy. Phexy is an on-demand, non-hormonal birth control. A vaginal cream that can be inserted before sex, Phexy maintains the natural pH of the vagina at a level that is lower than optimal for sperm. This slows the movement of sperm to such an extent that it can't reach the egg to fertilize it. It has a 95% success rate, making it the equivalent in efficacy to condoms. Through understanding the nuances of the job, EvoFem have created a product that empowers women to feel in control of their bodies and confident in intimate moments.
So, once you have understood the problem or the job, as we've just described, that is trying to be done, it's critical to also understand the context too, which is our next inclusivity pillar. When it comes to context, there are three things to remember. Women don't always buy a product because of who they are. No two women are exactly the same. So, for example, not all women menstruate, and not everyone who menstruates is a woman. And third, the same person can have different needs in different contexts. Categorizing a user as a 32-year-old soccer mum from California fails to capture the nuances of when, where, and how they are looking to get a job done. To put a woman's needs in the center of a brief, teams really must take research beyond a quantitative survey. A mere tick box won't capture the emotional and social circumstance in which a product is being used. We recommend in-depth qualitative interviews to really understand people as part of a contextual system, rather than just as a group of personas.
Considering when, where, and how the job will be done was central to the development of the LV breast pump. Historically, breast pumps have been a cumbersome, noisy faff, with long tubes that significantly restrict movement and take a long time to clean after use. This is not only inconvenient, in some contexts it makes pumping impossible. Consider a parent who's running after more than one child at home, or someone who needs to pump at work. They have needs that go far beyond expressing breast milk. LV conducted extensive user research and realised that to be appropriate to the broadest possible range of contexts, their new breast pump needed to fulfil 3 specific needs. It needed to be hands-free. In fact, LV took this one step further and made their pump wearable and so discreet that under clothes it's almost unnoticeable. Silent. By eliminating noise, LV can be used anywhere and at any time. And hassle-free, meaning that there are no cords or snaking tubes. It is easy to assemble and easy to clean. LV understood that one woman can have many different needs in different contexts. They did their research to understand these needs and used this insight to create a product that empowers women to achieve their jobs to be done no matter where they are, whether that's on the sofa at home, at work, or on the go.
So finally, the third pillar to inclusivity is around understanding the ecosystem. Now, by this, we mean mapping out all the stakeholders that exist around a job really helps understand the exchange of value and influence that actually exists, as well as understanding how important the jobs are and how well satisfied existing solutions are actually meeting these jobs for the primary user. Understand that they are part of an ecosystem that will help you take into account the different experiences that other stakeholders may have. So think about the partner, the child, or maybe even a carer. Take, for example, a heterosexual couple who are trying for a baby. Both the male and the female will have the same emotional need around feel that the conception it's a natural process. But what does the term natural mean? What pre-existing mental models actually exist that will determine how natural is perceived by both the man and the woman? Understanding this need from different perspectives will ensure that the solution is meaningful, intuitive, but also enjoyable for whoever may use it.
In order to include all the relevant stakeholders in an ecosystem, we need to think beyond FemTech as 2 separate words. Understanding FemTech as technology for women can be limiting and excluding, hindering innovation rather than driving it forward. Catherine Ryder is the founder of Maven Clinic, a telehealth platform that offers services relating to fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and family care. It caters to what would mostly be considered female needs, as those are the areas that tend to be missed or underserved by mainstream healthcare. But this doesn't mean that their users are exclusively female. 30% of Maven members are men, and Ryder is careful not to exclude them in the way that she talks about the platform. Rather than talking about Maven Clinic as FemTech, Ryder defines her mission in terms of people to ensure that all members feel welcome and included by her product. This is why we feel that inclusivity is such an important pillar of our FemTech philosophy. FemTech as a philosophy provides you with a solution-agnostic, needs-based, flexible approach that is adaptable and will enable you to include all relevant stakeholders.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jess. So our next principle is in the FemTech philosophy is experience-led design. Now, product design and innovation is ever evolving. In many ways, the opportunity ahead is less about making new products and more about focusing on designing seamless experiences. At CDP, we believe that employing an experience-led design process will lead to solutions that are simple, intuitive, enjoyable, and which will lead to an increased consumer satisfaction and retention. As well as understanding the jobs, context, ecosystem, and journey maps, as we described in our inclusivity principle, here we advocate overlaying the external and disciplinary lens to truly understand the solution space, not only to start to understand how to win, but also to ensure that you have a right to have a seat at the table, so to speak. So there are 3 main pillars that support this principle of experience-led design. The first pillar, is understand what is driving change. Now, long-established techniques, such as the acronym PESTLE, are still as relevant today as they ever have been, due to how quickly external factors are moving and changing. And even these techniques themselves are evolving to reflect the changing environment. The traditional 4Ps of marketing, for example, product, price, place, and promotion, have been replaced with the 4Es, experience, exchange, every place, and evangelism. Using these marketing techniques help keep us true to understanding what is driving and influencing change within the consumer and healthcare space, not just today, but also how this shape will be changed and influenced in the future. So some key questions to ask yourself to help you design seamless experiences could be, what government policies or political groups could be beneficial or detrimental to the seamless experience success? What economical factors will impact us moving forward? How could a change in consumer value or beliefs impact them actually buying your service? What technological advances are available today or what's on the horizon? What do we understand about the regulations and laws across the markets? And are we prepared for future environmental targets? This all allows an element of future-proofing through exploring potential disruptive scenarios and factoring this into the design process to avoid having to go back to the drawing board if, as, and when external parameters will shift. We are also seeing that the traditional category borders are actually blurring between the consumer and the healthcare space, which is creating new and exciting opportunities for innovation, just like FemTech. But it's also creating some really complex regulatory landscapes. So it's no surprise that the two biggest barriers for FemTech are from a political and a regulatory standpoint.
So the regulatory landscape for FemTech is definitely changing as FemTech products creep into the realm of regulated medical devices. In 2018, Natural Cycles was the first digital birth control app to receive clearance from the FDA. Fertility pioneer Clue was the second in March 2021. The regulatory landscape for sex toys is also set to change, with the ISO making progress towards new standards. This will help to clarify some of the confusion that has risen around statements such as "for novelty use only" that have historically been printed on sex toy packaging. Until this is finalised, the regulation of medical devices provides a good clue as to where action is needed to future-proof FemTech. But changing regulation is not all that the FemTech companies have to contend with. Laura DiCarlo, a sex tech company, faced significant political barriers when, in 2019, CES revoked their honorary designation in robotics and banned the company from exhibiting at the show. This decision was defended by the award organizer, who claimed that the Osei robotic massager broke the show rules, which stated that products that are immoral, obscene, indecent, profane, or not in keeping with the CTA's image will be disqualified. It then backtracked and said that the product just didn't fit into the robotics and drones category. This kick-started many conversations around CES's unevenly enforced policies. As the Laura DiCarlo website succinctly puts it, in 2019, Osei won a CES Honorary Innovation Award, only to have it taken away once the CTA realised that it was a pleasure tech product designed for people with vaginas. It was a political decision based on the assumptions of the organisers. Months after the show, the CTA revisited their decision and reinstated the award. They also allowed some sex tech companies to exhibit at the 2020 CES show. This time, Laura DiCarlo won 2 coveted honorary prizes. As this example demonstrates, Laura DiCarlo overcame some of the barriers in the way of FemTech companies through sharing their story and raising awareness. However, many political barriers still remain for FemTech companies to overcome.
So once you've understood what is driving change, we really recommend understanding what is then shaping change and perception. And this is our second experience-led design pillar. Propelled by the digital and sustainability megatrends, the new millennium has witnessed an ever-accelerating rate of change. The emergence of the first digitally native generations is seeing new patterns of social and business engagement emerge, with one of the clearest examples being the growth of online retail. The word experience does not refer to only the usage of the product or service, but also the purchasing and afterlife process as well. Decision-making preferences are also evolving from a product-based world to one which has more human forms of value which are taking preference. Things like experience, service, and relationships. These are all becoming more primary commodities. Social, ethical, and environmental impacts are also transitioning from lower order requirements to those which are key influencers today. So, for example, from a social perspective, smart business models and ecosystems that are being created to help consumers support world-changing causes and feel connected on a social responsibility front are becoming more mainstream. Ethically, going the extra mile to achieve ethically sourced materials and manufacturing, not just to minimize negative impact made on society, but also to have a positive impact on a particular cause. And then finally, environmentally, having transparency is no longer enough. Companies need to be fully open and traceable from a resourcing and a supply chain perspective to tackling end-of-life responsibility. Be it reuse, recycle, or repurchase, it's a growing baseline expectation across the consumer space.
These changing consumer expectations have been particularly evident in the menstrual hygiene category. A demand for total ingredient transparency has led to a huge growth for organic, plastic-free period care. Organic, natural tampons, initially a niche product offering, have rapidly become table stakes for many period care brands, particularly in the UK. From a social perspective as well, increased awareness of period poverty and the challenge around menstrual equity have led to many brands creating business models that give back to the community. For example, Flow, a company that specialises in organic period care, make it clear that every pack gives back through donating a percentage of their profits to the charities that are fighting period poverty. And it's not only in menstrual care that ingredient transparency is being considered. Bloomy, a FemTech e-commerce platform, works with a team of experts to screen every product it sells to ensure that they meet Bloomy's clean standard. This means that products on their site do not contain any harmful or toxic ingredients, allowing their customers to peruse their catalogue with total confidence. Creating a space for customers to explore intimate care and sexual wellness products from a range of brands is extremely valuable because FemTech products are widely censored on social media, making it harder to reach their target audience. Through curating brands that customers can trust in a way that allows them to explore and learn about new innovations, women can feel empowered to experiment with new products and experiences.
So our third and final pillar for experience-led design is understanding how to leverage different disciplinary perspectives in design. Now, inclusive and user-centered design is very much at the heart of what we do at CDP to ensure that innovations, be them product, service, or experience-led, are usable by as many people as reasonably possible without the need for specialized adaptation. This means we have to go beyond just women solving women's needs. Harnessing a multidisciplinary team within the front end of innovation allows for a wealth of experience, perceptions, and viewpoints to be leveraged very early on. For example, recently, we ensured that our designers and engineers accompanied fieldwork to hear firsthand the frustrations that women have when undertaking a breast cancer biopsy, to really ensure that they could design not only an accurate medical tool, but one which would have a desired user experience as well. But this goes beyond working in and leveraging the experience and perceptions of multiple disciplines. It also touches on how you leverage, engage, and work in this way. We have seen an accelerated interest and adoption of agile and test and learn methodologies being used in order to quickly and smartly leverage knowledge and learning to help drive innovation forward. From corporates setting up internal accelerators and sprint programs, to ecosystems of accelerators being formed to support startups, how you leverage different disciplines and perspectives is just as important as the range of discipline representation that you have within your team.
So an organisation that's doing this really well is FemTech Labs. FemTech Labs are the first FemTech-focused accelerator in Europe. They bring together subject matter experts, investors, and business coaches to kickstart FemTech founders and help them grow their businesses. The FemTech Lab Accelerator Programme is short and intense, providing opportunities for FemTech startups to grow quickly and sustainably by drawing on the expertise of a multidisciplinary network.
Now, our final principle of the FemTech philosophy is the smart integration of technology. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, but at CDP, we feel the best way to succeed is to forget about the tech. At first, anyway. This is often where we see big corporates and startups trip up. At CDP, we recommend a solution-agnostic approach to design, as you'll have seen. This says start with the user and then look at the best way to fulfill the need that you've identified. Now, this might involve tech, but it also might not. Even then, the tech might not necessarily be digital, which often is the first thing that comes to mind when we think of FemTech solutions. Instead, it might actually focus on the device itself, the manufacturing process, the choice of material, or maybe the surrounding service that goes alongside. So again, there are three pillars that sit underneath our third principle. The first one of this, as you can see, is consider the application of existing technology. Now, most technology devices today are likely to be using sensors, either non-contact sensors, contact-based sensors, and those are typically worn around the wrist or somewhere else on the body, or a multi-sensory approach. Now, these sensors will typically measure parameters such as physiological changes, so this could be skin temperature, heart rate, or blood oxygen levels. It could be mental state, which includes things like stress levels, anxiety, and emotional state. Or it could also be environmental, and this could be things like the external temperature, the humidity, or maybe even the light levels. Essentially, sensors can measure any number of different physiological, mental, or environmental parameters. And this approach is already largely being employed across the consumer industry. Now, while there are some limitations around the quality and accuracy of this data, as technology and sensors improve over time, this will change. And also, whilst monitoring and tracking these physiological parameters can be of benefit to the user, it is the interpretation of this data to provide users with actionable steps to make changes or improvements, which is infinitely going to be of more value going forward.
Bloomer Tech is using sensors in a new way to gather data on women's heart health, using ordinary clothes to collect extraordinary data. By using washable, flexible circuits, Bloomer is able to gather data on heart health from clothing that feels like, well, clothes. This data is collected and analysed to provide real-time medical-grade data, which can be collected discreetly and comfortably all day long. Collecting heart health data allows women to track cardiovascular disease over time, providing opportunities for personalised preventative healthcare, while also contributing to a vast data set on women's health. Applying this novel sensor technology to new challenges allows data to be collected that previously was impossible or extremely uncomfortable to collect.
So, as well as considering if existing technology could be used, we also recommend considering if existing technology could be applied, but in a new or different way. So our second pillar for the smart integration of technology recommends considering the new application of existing tech. Now, ultrasound, for example, was originally developed for clinical purposes to determine the diameter of the head of a fetus. And we have now seen that ultrasound technology has evolved into 2D and 3D. And thanks to the advances in today's fetal imagery market, a 3D sonogram is very affordable. But the development hasn't stopped there. 4D and even 5D options are now becoming available, allowing people to view live movement, blood flow from the heart, and even motions of the actual internal organs, which is fascinating. But the new application of existing technology also goes beyond these incremental developments to exploring the opportunities that can be opened up through redeployment. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated with the application of both existing and emerging technologies, in some cases by 5 times the predicted rate. For example, the mass adoption of telehealth and remote working, to name but a few. This year alone, there is already a focus on the redefinement and retooling of these existing technologies, especially those that took the spotlight during the year of social distancing and lockdown, but also the experimentation and redeployment of these technologies in new and different ways. Take AI technology, for example. As companies continue to explore how they can better connect with consumers, we are seeing businesses prioritize using machine learning and artificial intelligence that can interpret and respond to human emotions. So what does this mean for FemTech? Could AI technologies allow us to actually personalize fertility monitoring? Another growing trend is around this digital reality, this hybrid of physical and virtual world. Now, these shared virtual spaces were once commonly only used for gaming. They're now transforming how we shop and how we interact with people and businesses. So let's think of FemTech. Could AR and VR provide a more enjoyable experience for cervical screening, for example, and therefore encourage more women to actually attend their regular appointments? Now, new application of existing technology encourages you to stretch the boundaries of the benefits delivered through technology that we know today, and really encourages you to think about what is possible by exploring new ways that existing technology can deliver meaningful value.
And the new application of technology doesn't always have to rely on kind of huge, novel AI, VR, really exciting kind of new technology. It can also be things that seem a bit kind of standard or we see all the time. CaliBalance is an excellent example of a novel product that applies existing technology in a new way to meet a previously unmet need. Cali is a wearable headband that enables patients suffering with vertigo to perform physical therapy movements independently, accurately, and effectively. There's a higher incidence rate of vertigo among women over 50, and it can be challenging to treat without repeated trips to a physiotherapist. Cali uses bone-conducting speakers, which have previously been used in hearing aids, and an accelerometer to track the head movements, allowing the patient to access a higher standard of care from home. This technology is simple. The wearable headband is easy to use and interact with, but the application of this technology offers huge value for patients who are able to treat their debilitating symptoms from home.
So our last, but by no means least pillar for this principle is consider user acceptance. So you've established a user need and you've developed this great tech-driven solution, but will female consumers really feel comfortable using it? It's really important to consider whether women are culturally ready to adopt a tech-led solution, particularly if it involves intimate wearables or sensitive data. For example, current technology is capable of analysing menstrual flow, but are women willing to accept intimate electrodes? Let's remember that in some parts of the world, tampons are still taboo. So this final pillar aims to ensure that you always have the desired and accepted female experience at the heart of every step of your design process, especially when exploring potential technology enablers, to ensure that the right questions are not only asked, but also answered very early on.
One company that did not consider user acceptance is Relida Limited, a technology company who claimed that they had developed an algorithm that could validate women's orgasms 85% of the time. Relida Limited pitched this breakthrough technology to a senior executive at a sex toy company, claiming that their algorithm could be useful in developing sex toys and confirming if they help women reach climax. The bemused executive pointed out that they were quite happy with their existing system of assessing how pleasurable their products were by asking the women who used them. This is an excellent cautionary tale of the risks inherent in pursuing tech for tech's sake. The founders of Relida Limited were interested in the science of orgasms, which is great. The female orgasm is shockingly under-researched. But by failing to speak to women and through not considering the needs that they were trying to meet, they created an algorithm that no one wanted and which was widely panned by the media.
So to wrap up today, we have shared with you the idea that FemTech is an innovation philosophy with 3 clear principles for creating meaningful innovation to significantly improve lives. Those are, first principle around inclusivity. Understand the problem or the job that is trying to be done. Understand the context, and then make sure you understand the ecosystem. The next principle, experience-led design. Understand what is driving change, what's then shaping that change, and how you can leverage different disciplinary perspectives in design, not just who, but the way that you do this, so the how as well. And then our final principle, the smart integration of technology. Make sure that you're considering the application of existing tech, but also the new application of this existing tech. And last, but by no means least, please always remember to consider user acceptance.
We'd like to today for supporting and improving women's health, each in their own unique and inspiring way. So whether you're a man or a woman, in R&D or marketing, in a global corporation or a startup, we hope that you can see how viewing FemTech as an innovation philosophy will enable you to take an inclusive, solution-agnostic approach to the jobs that you're trying to solve, and in turn enable you to deliver meaningful innovation that will significantly improve lives. Doing the FemTech conversation with you. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow, that was really fascinating. Thank you so much, Martha and Jessica. As a reminder, you can participate in today's session by asking questions via the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen, and then just hit the submit button. The first question is actually for you, Jessica. You talked a lot about products. Where does digital play in this? In particular, how would you recommend we deal with the potential conflict of the Internet of Things when it comes to intimate products?
So I mean, the short answer to this is that we need to have privacy built in to all FemTech products. This cannot be an afterthought. This has to be a really fundamental part of the design, both morally and also from a PR perspective, because the minute that you start losing, leaking, being hacked when you have intimate data, I mean, that's just an absolute disaster. But it's also about transparency. It's about how you tell users about the data that you're gathering and how it's going to be used. And not only just telling them in a way that they have to sort of scroll through 11 pages and then click accept. No one reads that. It's about telling them in a way that means it's easy to understand. It's engaging to understand, and they feel really empowered with, with how their data is being used and comfortable with that. I mean, there are some absolutely shocking examples of this. WeVibe was a vibrator that had been designed for couples so it could be controlled remotely. And they had the most enormous kind of legal action against them. I think they're going to have to pay every user up to $10,000 because the Bluetooth connection was so weak that it could actually be hijacked by other users, which, I mean, just opens up so many fascinating conversations around consent and so many issues around that. But it was also sharing data, ostensibly about the temperature of the vibrator itself with the parent company. But I'm sorry, the minute you start tracking temperature and usage of a vibrator, you know a lot about someone's sex life. You know more than you should be sharing with different companies. So, it's really important that every element of this data protection is considered, whether it's storing, whether it's sharing, whether it's Bluetooth connectivity. And I mean, it sounds boring, like regulation, privacy, it sounds boring, but it's such an exciting area to consider because brands have the opportunity to be total pioneers in this space. And I think that the other really exciting thing on the subject of FemTech is because we're faced with this huge knowledge gap in women's health, then, the data that FemTech companies are collecting, it should be used. It should be captured for research. I'm not saying that has to all be ignored. It's so powerful, but it's about the way that we communicate this. So I'm kind of circling back to what I said at the beginning about transparency. I signed up for Natural Cycles, and right at the beginning they said, can we use your data aggregated and anonymized to learn more about women's, menstrual health? I was like, hell yeah, please take my data, use my data, learn from it. Just, don't stick my name on it and share it with my private healthcare provider. So it's about really kind of being very considerate, very clear about what the data is and how it's going to be used.
And Martha, you highlighted that we have all functional, social, and emotional jobs. Which ones are the most important to focus on when creating new tech solutions?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, no, great question. So, I mean, different needs have different levels of importance depending on the context, which is why the context is so important to understand. It's not really about which one is just the most important. It's also about understanding levels of satisfaction that the current products are actually achieving with these needs. So you could have something that's super important, but actually has got low levels of satisfaction. And that's actually a really interesting area. A really important need, but actually is overly satisfied, actually might not be the one that you will springboard you into a really interesting and value added direction. With that being said, though, I mean, let's think about sort of those unimportant jobs that are maybe overly satisfied. I mean, we've all probably seen how disruptive the airline industry, the transport industry, has been by budget airlines, who essentially found those needs that weren't necessarily that important for the job you were trying to get done. Just taking a very quick a ride over to Europe, for example. I didn't necessarily need an in-flight meal. I didn't need a movie. So they could strip things like that out to actually make it a much more appealing proposition for me. So it's not just about what's the most important jobs, but maybe think about those unimportant jobs that are being overly served. So realised that wasn't really a FemTech answer there. So from a FemTech perspective, the experience is as important as the job, if not more so. So I'd say that we've got to remember that we are very emotional beings, and the experience is therefore shaped by our five senses. So you need to be thinking of that sensorial experience when you're actually then translating those needs into solutions. And what we mean by that is you need to think as well about those mental models that I alluded to earlier. You know, what does natural actually mean? And different people will translate those in different ways. But we might also have these preconceptions of how things should be translated and how far we're willing to stretch those. So things like, say, for the sanitary products, for example, there are loads of new materials being developed which are thinner and more absorbent. But actually, we've got these inbuilt mental models around what provides security and comfort, which might not actually lend themselves to us willingly going down a route that might actually provide a better solution. So few things to answer the question there, hopefully. Don't just think about what's most important when it comes to functional, social, emotional jobs. Think about levels of satisfaction and maybe think about things that are being overly served, but then also think about how you can actually translate those into those sensory attributes, into that actual end experience that consumers are going to have with your solution. I hope that answers your question.
So the next thing isn't really more of a question, it's more of a comment. It says, yes, so much of the existing fertility tech could be used for hormone tracking through gender transition. Does anyone have additional thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that there's some really exciting potential to look at kind of this reapplication of tech and taking tech as a really broad way of looking at it, you know. Things like lateral flow tests that check different levels of hormones can be applied to such a variety of uses. And I think that's really important. And that's where so much of the power of FemTech comes in, because we're finding ways of applying stuff that we have, you know, being really creative in the way that we approach these problems to overcome these gaps in what we understand at the moment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think stripping back technology is thinking of it as being technology is just a point in time solution to a problem. So taking this sort of solution agnostic approach, really understanding the job that you're trying to get done, really does unlock all these opportunities for these existing technologies and these transferable learnings. This is where a lot of innovations that we see happen in the market. It's not because there's suddenly been a new technology. It's just that people are starting to look at problems in a slightly different way and reapplying existing solutions from one context to another. So, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree, and would love to continue the conversation of just how many opportunities it could open up.
All right, and we got Another question. We see current FemTech innovations mainly around infertility and other areas seem ignored. Is it true? If yes, why are other areas being ignored?
So I think that's a brilliant question. And my first thought is to refer to the FemTech focus definition of FemTech, which is about products, technologies and services that are addressing conditions that affect women disproportionately, differently or solely. So, and I think that's, in terms of our inclusivity pillar, that's a really nice way of addressing FemTech, because it does encompass so much. And I think you're absolutely right. Initially, when it kind of began, the cresting wave of FemTech at the beginning was so much around menstruation, fertility, and that kind of thing. But I think looking forward, there's some incredibly exciting opportunities around conditions that affect women differently. Looking at things like heart attacks have a very different set of symptoms in women to men, which means that often in women, heart attacks are missed or treated later, resulting in worse outcomes. And so I think that products that look at heart health tracking, a little bit like Bloomy, they're really exciting going forward. Products or services that address things like Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, things that disproportionately or differently affect women, they're coming. I think that it's not just about fertility and menstruation. it's definitely emerging, but it's all about kind of balancing that passion, that drive, and also funding and awareness, because there's so much education that needs to go on with investors to help them understand that these are areas that should be funded. So I think it is coming, but it's a slower process perhaps.
Yeah, and if I can build on that, I think this is where sort of viewing FemTech, as Jess said, around the problems that are maybe indifferent or specific for women. It's not just sort of in this healthcare brand. I know maybe our examples very much focused more in this space, but we're seeing huge developments in the sport industry where women are really rocketing and taking front center stage. And there's so many examples in, say, sports of where women are pioneering new service development, product development, where we're looking at ways that the equipment, clothing, kit as well, are all now being tailored and specially made to actually take into consideration the way that the woman's body works, and the way that the different women's have different shapes, and how we can make sure that therefore we're being more inclusive about the way that we're also supporting and providing solutions in that space. I think as well, it's definitely being pioneered maybe in the infertility space, but I think, as we said earlier, category borders are blurring. Like it's not so cut and dry anymore. I think it will only take sort of this change, this shift in viewing innovation more as a philosophy, in the sense of how this can be translated and open up doors in other areas, but also then how some of these other sectors on the peripheral are also going to be bringing their learning into areas such as infertility. And you're going to start seeing new players come in and provide new and different solutions because of the way that the categories are reshaping themselves. So I think, as Jess said, we're really very much on the brink of a lot of learnings kind of being transitioned across different categories, across different borders, because it's not just sort of the healthcare space that is being sort of focused on. There's some really interesting areas taking place kind of on that in these other consumer sectors as well. Sport is one, to name a few. Thank you, though. Great question.
All right. Well, I'd love to thank our wonderful speakers, Martha and Jessica. This is a really interesting discussion today. For all of you joining us, we'll be sending a link to the recording soon. And thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.